Joining us for the next 2 hours.
Microphone.
Microphone. Yeah, I should not leave it off. I do sometimes because I'm talking to Carl about that. Anyway, New Hampshire Republican Senator Judd Gregg, and we were just having a conversation that we're a little misty. The end of Lost, the end of 24, the end of Law and Order. And there will be an end to
and the end of me.
Yeah,
thank you.
And all these things were fiction.
Sentiment.
You must feel like you
20 years of Law and Order, 18 years of Law and Gregg.
When is your last day?
Gone with the Wind.
When is your last day?
January 3rd or 4th, whenever they swear in the new Congress. Yeah.
So it's you've got some time left, and there's going to be some interesting things to watch.
There's some really interesting things. Well, we've got the banking regulation conference. We've got the financial reform, both of which I'll be involved in. And then we have the whole issue of whether we're ever going to do a budget again. You know, the United States Congress has decided budgets don't matter because we're going to spend $1.4 trillion that we don't have. And why should we tell anybody about it by having a budget?
The Journal's take on the FinReg that's there now is that that everybody's happy, that even the banks are happy because it's not nearly as punitive, and that they're going to be able to get they're still going to be able to get some of the most draconian things out of it. Washington's happy because they have more control over one of the key industries. The only people that are going to be hurt, it implies, are people that need credit or people in the country. That both the banks and Washington are both going to do fine. You think that?
Well, it's a disaster. I mean,
the bill is a disaster?
The bill is a disaster because it doesn't address the fundamental underlying causes of the economic issue, which were real estate and underwriting. It creates a massive new entity called this Consumer Protection Agency, which has got a $3 billion line of credit, which isn't overseen by anybody, and which will decouple consumer protection from safety and soundness of the banking industry. So you'll basically have a consumer agency which decides to go out and in the morning say, well, everybody who's XYZ should have a loan, even though the local community bank says XYZ shouldn't have a loan because if we give them a loan, we know they're not going to pay back. It's going to become an agency which defines lending on social justice purposes as versus on safety and soundness purposes.
Kind of like Fannie and Freddie.
Yeah, right, but even on steroids, and even have more authority and more capacity. And then on top of all of that, you've got this almost Alice in Wonderland Tea Party type atmosphere around derivatives. I mean, there's no coherence at all to the derivatives language in this bill because basically the construct will make the derivatives market less sound. It will cause a huge contraction in credit, maybe up to $750 billion for some of the estimates. And it will push massive amounts of derivative activity offshore and out of our control, so they'll even become less controllable in the sense of having oversight. So the bill itself has fundamental flaws which are not outweighed by the good parts of the bill. And there are some good parts of the bill, like too big to fail is well handled.
Yeah, because there are smart people that were behind this bill, well-intentioned, smart people. And, you know, we've had Geithner on, we've had Geithner in here, and they almost universally...
Behind is a good word, because they were so far behind this bill that they never came forward and said what should be done. You know, if you talk to the Treasury on the phone, which I did regularly through this process because I'd been sort of charged with the derivatives side, they'd tell you that what this bill did on derivatives was disastrous. You had the FDIC telling you that. You had the OCC telling you that. You had the Fed regulatory agencies telling you that. And yet there was a tacit attitude of, well, let's go forward anyway and we'll fix it somewhere in the future. Well, we're at the future now. When are we going to fix the bill so it actually functions as a legitimate effort to try to restructure our regulatory agencies in a constructive way that avoids the systemic risk, but also keeps us the best place in the world to create credit and capital? Because that's really is our unique advantage as a country, isn't it? That we're the best place in the world to create capital and credit if you're an entrepreneur. And yet we're undermining it fundamentally by putting in place a bill which is going to contract credit and significantly over-regulate the capital creators of this country so that risk-taking will be chilled.
We just went through a period where the problem was the extension of credit. So I'm not sure I understand why you're honing in on...
The extension of credit in the real estate markets.
Yes.
Because there was a complete decoupling of underwriting standards from debt issuance. This bill does nothing on that issue. The proposals on underwriting standards, which were pretty reasonable, which myself and Bob Corker put forward, were totally rejected. This bill does nothing.
The way I look at hold on to 5% or 10%.
Yeah, if you didn't put down, you had to put down 5%. And if you didn't put down 20%, you had to insure over the 20%. That's essentially what we proposed, which is the old law, you know, what we did prior to the mid-90s. And the way I looked at this whole crisis was it's sort of like an inverted pyramid. There's this one person down here who wanted a loan on a house, let's say. The house didn't have the value that the loan was being given at, but they expected it to appreciate to get the value. And the person didn't have the capacity to pay the loan back when the price reset, which we knew it would because the loan was given out at 0 interest. It was going to reset in 3 years. And we knew he couldn't support it or she couldn't support it. And then that loan was taken and it was securitized and it was subdivided and it was syndicated and it became a huge inverted pyramid with a little person down here paying off a loan that they couldn't pay off on a house that didn't have the value. That's all underwriting. That's all underwriting, and we do nothing about underwriting in this bill.
Why? Why is that? I mean, we've talked to Senator Corker about this as well, but why is it so difficult to reinstate the laws that were already essentially on the books before this whole crisis happened?
This bill became a populist rant. You know, this bill became, I want to score the most points I can against Wall Street type of bill. That's what the purpose of this bill became. And so most of the initiative in this bill wasn't directed at resolving the problem which actually created the issue. It was directed at scoring political points and gaining a political event vis-a-vis what was seen as the enemy, which was Wall Street.
What's going to happen in conference?
I have no idea. I've been asked to be on the conference, hope to serve on the conference, but it's very hard to know. I mean, I don't think Barney Frank ever thought he was going to get from the Senate a bill that was to the left of him, which is exactly what's happened. So Barney may be the reasonable person in the room. I like Barney, and actually he is quite reasonable on these issues usually, on a variety of them, but I'm not sure I want to entrust the future of the financial system to him.
Do you take them seriously, Democrats, when they say that they will address Fannie and Freddie in due course?
No, no. I mean, if they want, you cannot do major financial reform unless you do Fannie and Freddie.
Right.
And Fannie and Freddie have become the too big to fix issue, you know? I mean, basically, the Congress doesn't want to face up to the fact that there's $500 billion of taxpayer liability here. We won't even bring it on budget. I offered an amendment to bring it on budget. Right. Senator Crapo offered an amendment to bring it on budget. It was rejected.
It's 96.5% of all loans that are being made today are backed up by Fannie and Freddie. So what happens to the housing market if it doesn't have Fannie and Freddie there in this capacity?
Well, if you phase Fannie and Freddie out in an orderly way, which is exactly what we should do, and transfer it to the private sector, so there isn't the taxpayer implied and now actually implicit guarantee behind it, the markets will adjust, right. And they will create properly ordered credit as versus artificially protected credit by the taxpayer, and as a result, you'll get a better market and a stronger market.
Yeah, you really seem hung up on this whole free market. That's the way to do things, yeah. And you're not really getting with the program, Judd.
I know. I've been listening to you too long. It's worn me down.
Listen to me. Listen to me. You put smart people in the government, you let them run things, and that's the way we're going to do it. And you
just step back and let them run your life. That's the theory of this government.
You apparently haven't been watching what's happening in Europe, because it's a heck of a system. Of a system. People live much better. Q. They do. Get more time off.
Sure, they're thanking us for selling them a lot of paper.
Oh, is that what happened? It wasn't retiring at 40 and not paying any taxes, and cradle to grave social net that had nothing to do with it.
Never one cause.
It was Goldman Sachs selling them CDOs. Is that what caused the implosion?
I'm not saying it's what caused it. I'm saying it didn't help.
You know, it is.
No one forced them to buy it.
It is ironic that the template that we have chosen now under our government is to pursue the activities of the Western European governments.
And there's a disconnect. Nobody's watching and connecting what's happening here with the end result of what's happening there.
Well, you have this fundamental problem in the Western societies today and in Japan, and it's this. When you have massive populist government meeting a massive demographic shift in an entitlement society, right. You get unsustainable debt. And that's what's happening throughout Europe. It's coming at us, and it's already happened to Japan. And so we've got to step back and say, well, now how do you handle a massive demographic shift in a political society? There's an interesting chart that somebody showed me that showed that the state market economies have the least amount of debt and the political market economies have the most amount of debt. Well, that's obvious because we vote the debt, because it's the way you get reelected. We're going to have to step back and say, well, that's not the way you get reelected. The way you get reelected is you've got to face up to the economic reality, and you cannot pass on to the next generation an unsustainable country.
And that's happening. That's happening. It's becoming politically valuable.
This week, we're going to take up $200 billion of additional spending, most of which won't be paid for. So it's not happening too quickly.
All right.
All right. Well, coming up, we head to the Gulf.